This is a 2003 Lincoln LS. It has a problem with the antifreeze leak. It had codes went into a protect mode where the cylinder heads have overheated. It doesn't skip around or miss anything. There's no water in the oil yet, but that can't be good. Short term, I don't see a problem as yet, but who knows. It's got hot enough that it was probably shutting cylinders down to keep it from getting hotter. Not a lot of pressure. I checked for back pressure on the cooling system and it's not building any. So I'd say it may have skimmed through somehow for now. And I believe that housing coming up to this thermostat assembly is busted down there. I've cleaned that off and cleaned it off and it just keeps coming back, so must be busted. That pipe down in there is called the inlet pipe. It goes back into this thermostat housing. It looks like somebody's replaced that housing. Probably was an aftermarket one. Just looking this over, you could really go two ways. You could either take this mess off the front through them bolts, and there's some bolts on the side. It's hooking the heads together. And these hoses. There's a lot of stuff that have to be taken off the throttle body anyway, if you went that route. And the other route is to pull all the fuel injector and the fuel rails and take that plenum off, which would bring the throttle body with it. It's just a matter of taste. I really didn't want to pull with the injectors. Now either way, the EGR valve nut's got to be broke loose. And all these pipes and hoses removed on the throttle body. First thing I did was drain some of the antifreeze out of it. The petcock drain on the radiator is on the passenger side bottom, but it did get everywhere. It wasn't a good deal. Next thing I'm going to do is take this, we're calling it a water outlet pipe, but I'm calling it a thermostat housing, and the hoses off of it. Let's see what I can see underneath this throttle body. Evidently the throttle body to intake plenum gasket isn't available for Ford anymore. So I have to consider recycling that one or find an alternative to it. I'm using an 1 1/16 wrench and a 19mm or it'd be like a 3/4 as a backup on the EGR valve nut to get it loose. Got the EGR valve off. Gotta catch your gasket, it falls down the valley there. It's a metal shim. Gotta be careful pulling these hoses off and work them gradual, because that whole outfit flexes any stress you put on it, and that's an accident waiting to happen. I've got the big hoses off of it, and I've got a lot of the hoses off the throttle body, vacuum lines, PCV valve vent. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the throttle body and adapter. I use this about an 8-inch extension with a 5/16 deep well to get the bolt out on the very bottom back in there. You gotta got another one on this corner and up here, and one down in there. That'll open it up. This takes some manipulating, and you gotta watch the fuel rail crossover pipe between the rails, but just some wiggling, it'll come up out of there. There's a line, another antifreeze line underneath here. You might slip it off and push it out of the way. But anyway, there's the elusive not made O-ring anymore. There sure is a lot of oil laying in there. Well, at least it's not water. Now this pipe here is the one where the antifreeze is forming up. I really couldn't get it to leak unless it was running. The back two bolts were running into the intake plenum because of a clearance issue. I got the right one out by taking a razor blade and notching a little place in the plastic. I'm going to do that for this side. They were just the right length that I needed about another turn or half turn to come out of there. But shaving it with a razor blade worked for it. Fixing that relief worked good. I still had to wrench it up the face of it just a little bit, but there's not really any noticeable material missing, but it's enough to get the clearance I needed. Yep, that's an outfit there. These seals for them. Coming down the inside of this piece. If somebody reused a seal on it or something. I pulled the pipe out of the back of that. It's rotten. A piece of it fell on the floor when I pulled it apart. It's just falling apart. The lip that held the O-ring is just broke off. There could be stress fractured in there. This is rotten. Look in the bottom of that pipe over it. It looks like it has a stress crack running down the seam. I cleaned the faces of the aluminum off. Got them nice and smooth. I stuck this new pipe in there. I left them 4 bolts just a little bit loose till I got these front 4 bolts tightened down, and then finished up tighten that down so that all these both these loose parts would settle together here at this O-ring. Now I just got to drop the throttle body adapter back down in there and put this hose back on it. I'm going to clean the rust off this nipple first. I'll clean the face off of this. I'm going to have to reuse that O-ring. It's sticking up, so it's good enough to work. Just put some tape on a 5/16 socket. Just push a piece of tape down across it and shove the bolt head in it, and that will help hold the bolt on there so you can fish it through the deeper ends. I went ahead and put this hose on. Tighten the bolts down kind of evenly. I'll go ahead and mount the EGR valve back in place. Start putting the hoses back on the throttle body and this other radiator hose. I went ahead and put this hose on the underside. I got it back together, started the car up, and watch the temperatures on the scan tool. The temperature gauge is pretty much useless. It has a 40-degree range that it doesn't move, but in the halfway range, and it only varies by a 1/16 of an inch in that 40-degree range from about 190 to 230. 240 it didn't change, so it's more like a 50-degree range. The temperature gauge says it's setting at half, and 240 is pushing anything. It did climb to 238, 239, and I ended up turning the heater on high, and the heat began dissipating, and fans running full blast out here. And this radiator pipe is hot, but because it has a line going to the heater core, it circulates the heater core to the thermostat to this line, and the line on the upper radiator hose teed into the upper radiator hose at that joint there. Keeps it in loop. With the heater off, the temperature climbs again. With the heater on, the temperature falls off to 204 degrees or so. As soon as you shut the heater off, it starts climbing, and it wouldn't stop. Like I said, it hit almost 240, and no signs of ending. The radiator was cold. This pipe was cold from the radiator. And the radiator was cold on both sides. So, since it has an excellent heater, I'm going to assume the water pump is doing its job. And it carries the heat off well. The temperature here is about 25 degrees at the moment, and just the heater running on high is enough to carry the heat off idling. But it has a brand new radiator in it, I was informed, so that's not a likely culprit. Not impossible. There could have been a manufacturing defect in it, but I expect this housing has an aftermarket thermostat in it, which is unpredictable. I checked this thermostat. It's not airlocked. Let's say it doesn't good as long as you let the heater carry the heat off. But there's never been any heat coming to the radiator, so it's got to be in the thermostat. I suspected that thermostat was stuck. That's probably what split that pipe, as the excess pressure and temperature. I just finished removing that aftermarket housing so I can get ready to put the factory housing back on it. That's the new inlet pipe there. And this is the thermostat that came out of it. A one-piece deal with a pin that separates from it. And this is the new factory one. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that don't stay together. That's the part number. And that's the order according to the Ford work manual. This wide part of this cone-shaped spring goes into this recess and supports the end of this copper piece, and then the spring, big spring, separates the two of them. But none of it hooks together solid until it's in the housing. Some assembly required. None of this stuff will interchange with this aftermarket. The OEM's totally different. That's really going to be an expensive outfit now. This is the diameter of this. This is the differences between an aftermarket housing and OEM housing. It's substantially smaller. This is a new factory housing. And got to line this pin up with a hole down in there, and supposedly stick an 18mm wrench underneath of this ear and turn it into those ears down in there. Either way, something else. I'll just stick it back together. Put a new seal in here and new seals here. All these bolts torque to 89 inch-pounds. All of them. I went ahead and lubed this big O-ring in the inlet pipe and put some lubrication on the inside of this housing so it'll slide on there easy enough. Break none of the nipples off. And all your seals are in place. Stick a wedge between that inlet pipe and the throttle body to help brace it so that this water outlet housing can slide onto it without stressing it out. So that took care of it. Temperature staying where it needs to be now.